Lección de Gramática 16.1 El futuro. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about how to use the future tense in Spanish. I'm sorry if I got your hopes up that we'd be talking about hoverboards and spacecraft and things like that, but what we're really going to be learning to do is how to talk about something that will happen in the future, whether it's the near future or distant future. We've already learned a couple of different ways that we can speak about the future in Spanish. When you learned the present tense, you learned the verb ir for to go, and so then you also learned that you can add simple words or phrases to a phrase that includes the verb ir to indicate that something is happening in the near future. In the example here, voy al cine mañana. I'm going to the movies tomorrow. So simply by adding the word mañana, it gives it a little bit of a sense of something that's happening in the future. Next, we learned how to use the ir plus a plus infinitive formula to express that someone is going to do something. And this is sometimes called the simple future, and this is a very common formula, and you can continue using this even once you learn this future tense that we're talking about today. We also learned a little bit about the present subjunctive and how sometimes that form can be speaking about things that are going to happen in the future, as in the example here, ojalá vaya al cine mañana. I hope that I will go to the movies tomorrow. And then, of course, there's the actual future tense, which we'll be focusing on today in today's lesson. The example here, iré al cine. I will go to the movies. Let's talk a little bit about the conjugations in the future tense. These are different than any conjugations you're used to, but they're different in a good way. These are actually easier than most of the conjugations you've learned so far. Typically, when you conjugate verbs, you have to think about whether it's an AR verb, an ER verb, or an IR verb. And what you're used to doing is taking that ending off of the infinitive form of a verb and then adding a different ending. Well, that's kind of irrelevant with future tense conjugations, actually, because what we're going to be doing this time is you keep the infinitive form of the verb and you simply add to the end of it. So using the AR verb estudiar as an example, I'm going to show you the endings for the future tense. In the yo form, you simply add an accented E, as in the example here, estudiaré, for I will study. The to form, you add an accented A with an S, estudiarás, for you will study. In the he, she, or formal you, so the el, ella, usted form, the ending is an accented A, as in the example, estudiará. In the nosotros form, your ending that you add is hemos, as in estudiaremos, we will study. The vosotros ending that you're adding is es, as in estudiaréis, y'all will study. And the ellos, ellas, ustedes ending is an accented an, as in estudiarán, they will study, or you guys will study. As I mentioned earlier, it doesn't really matter if the verb is an AR, ER, or IR verb, since we're simply adding these endings to the end of the infinitive. So you can look at the example aprender, which is an ER verb, and you notice that we add the exact same endings to this infinitive as we added to the end of estudiar. Typically, when we are conjugating verbs, we have to consider whether or not they are stem-changing verbs. But the good news is, in the future tense, it doesn't really matter, because even if it's a stem-changing verb, we're simply going off of the infinitive form of the verb when we form the future tense. So it's kind of irrelevant whether or not it's stem-changing. Now, by now, you're used to, every single time we learn a new tense in Spanish, you're used to having a couple of irregulars that kind of break the rules and you just simply have to memorize. And while I wish I could say there are no irregular forms with the future tense, that's not the case. There are a few, so let's go over those now. Okay, I'm going to be showing you the infinitive form of the verb and then the irregular stem, which is going to look kind of like the verb but a little different, and then you'll kind of see how that irregular stem is used in the example of the yo form. So the first irregular verb in the future tense is decir, for to say or to tell. The irregular stem that we're going to be using, instead of decir in front of those future tense endings, it'll just be dir. So the future yo form to say I will tell or I will say is diré. Hacer is also an irregular verb, so the future yo form is haré. If you wanted to put other endings on there, you could. So then the future to form would be tú harás. Él, ella, or usted hará. Poder is also irregular, with the yo form being podré. Poner looks very similar to poder, so you have to be kind of careful with these, but the irregular yo form of poner would be pondré. Querer, if I wanted to say I will want in the future, yo quiere. Saber, I will know or I will find out, yo sabré. Salir in the future would be yo saldré, I will leave or I will go out. And tener is yo tendré, I will have. Venir, yo vendré, I will come in the future. And those are all of your exceptions. So that concludes today's lesson. It was a short and sweet one. We will be practicing this tense in class, but I think you will see that this future tense is really pretty easy once you get those irregulars memorized. There's not too much else to it.